Okay.
Okay, sir.
So if everybody has come, 104 people have come, I think it's time for us to start. So we'll start the case discussion.
Okay.
Please read the case history.
A 25-year-old female, she's a housewife, is admitted with history of progressive edema of the feet,
Wait. When
oliguria, and
that's all
spotty
right.
urine of
That's
1
okay.
month duration.
Okay. When someone comes with edema of the feet, what are the possibilities? So possibilities you consider in this case.
It could be a cardiac problem like congestive heart failure.
Okay. Fine.
Sir, it could be a cardiac problem.
Yes, it can be.
It
Yes.
could be a renal problem like nephrotic syndrome.
In the renal problem like nephrotic syndrome. Other renal
It
problems
can
start
be
as
fetal
puffiness
hepatic
phase.
diseases.
Hepatic disease basically starts in the abdomen. So there is a site from which it starts. Cardiac failure
Yes, sir.
agreed.
Then
People may
there can
sometimes
be hyperalbuminemia.
people may sometimes complain that they have got some pain somewhere. They took some NSAIDs. They developed edema. Drug-induced edema is common. Hypothyroidism can produce edema.
Okay, sir.
So there are different causes for edema. Okay, basic things you have told: cardiac failure, renal disease, hepatic disease, hyperproteinemia, drug-induced, hypothyroid. Okay, fine. Carry on. So first complaint is edema. Yes.
On examination.
No. Before that, edema. What else? 1 month history of edema, oliguria. So there's decreased amount of urine output. Okay. Then.
Yes, sir.
Then.
Frothy urine.
Frothy
1 month
urine.
duration.
Yes. So what do you make out here?
Proteinuria.
Yes. Possibly the patient has got proteinuria. What is pneumaturia?
Air in the urine.
Air in the urine. How do you get air in the urine? Is it possible?
Yes, sir.
How? Sometimes there is a fistulous communication with the urinary system and gastrointestinal system. Maybe it's a malignancy like carcinoma colon. It can be simple straightforward tuberculosis. It can be simple straightforward things like Crohn's disease. The commonest you get in Western countries is diverticulitis. As a complication, fistulous tract can come, but which is relatively less often seen in India, where people are not that much constipated. So diverticulosis, not that frequent as you find in Western Hemisphere. Okay, carry on.
Okay, sir. On examination.
Yes.
Edema was 3+. Puffy face was seen. Nails show no aqueous lines in different nails. Pulse was 80 beats per minute. Blood pressure was 140 by 100 millimeters of mercury. JVP was increased.
Elevated, not increased, elevated.
JVP was elevated.
Normally it is not seen.
Respiratory rate was 20 breaths per minute. On examination of the respiratory system, there was dullness bilaterally in the infrascapular, infraaxillary and axillary areas. Ascites was present. CVS and CNS were within normal limits.
Okay, so one by one findings. One examination, patient was found to be edematous. By examining, how do you look for edema?
In the dependent areas?
Yes, dependent areas you look for pitting. So by looking for pitting, can you say it is a acute edema, chronic edema, or etiology? Can you make out anything from that? Is there a way to say it is hyperproteinemia by examining the edema part?
If it's pitting edema, it's most likely to be hyperproteinemia.
In cardiac failure, is it pitting?
Yes, sir.
Nice. So how to differentiate?
Based on the size.
Site both condition, it is in the dependent parts, no, feet. So basically in hyperproteinemia, the moment you touch the skin, it goes down deep. Okay, easily pitting. You don't use any pressure. It goes like no resistance. That's a feature of hyperproteinemia edema. But on the other hand, if you find it difficult to pit, that indicates a chronicity, chronic edema. Even cardiac failure, after many months of time, you find that you cannot pit that easily. So pitting is an important point. That's good. Okay. Next point.
Puffiness of face.
Yes, puffiness you already discussed. Different causes are there. One cause could be renal. Okay.
Then the nails show Moeckers lines.
What is that?
They are white transverse lines seen on the nails, usually in conditions of hyperproteinemia.
So how to differentiate from the Mies lines or lines of other lines of hyperproteinemia? How does this sign differ? Mucous lines.
It's seen in different nails.
It can be seen in different nails at two parallel lines, and it crosses the nail completely. Okay, and
Okay,
the
sir.
site of the basic thing is inside the nail bed. Okay, so since
Okay,
it is
sir.
in the nail bed, it does not move with the nail growth. Okay. Mies lines,
Okay.
on the other hand, affect the matrix. So Mies line, which condition produce Mies line classically? Arsenic poisoning. So there are situations,
Okay.
the line will be moving forward as months advances. Nail growth is proportionate to the movement of this line, but these lines do not move. Okay. Yes.
Okay, sir.
So what does indicate to you? Hypoalbuminemia. So you have got edema here, you had frothy urine indicates of proteinuria, and then you have got evidence of hypoalbuminemia. Okay.
Then her vitals pulse was normal. It was 80 beats per minute. Her blood pressure was increased. It was 140 by 100. Her JVP was elevated.
How do you explain that?
Fluid overload.
Fluid overload, say. So in addition to cardiac failure, fluid overload can also produce raised JVP. Fine.
Then her respiratory rate was 20 breaths per minute, which is normal. And on the respiratory system examination, there was dullness bilaterally.
So tell me some conditions producing dullness of lung bases.
Consolidation.
Very good. 2,
Pleural effusion.
3, collapse of the lung.
Okay, sir.
4, mass lesion. Okay. So bilateral dullness. Stony dullness means pleural effusion. If it's only dullness, it could be even interstitial lung disease. Bilateral symmetrical consolidation is unusual.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it can occur but unusual. So there's a clue that this patient is possibly having pleural effusion. That is possible, right?
Then ascites was present.
Ascites is present, not was. It is present. Ascites is present. Okay. What is meant by ascites?
Accumulation of free fluid in the peritoneal.
That's
cavity.
right. So there is fluid in the peritoneal cavity. There is fluid inside both pleura, and there is generalized edema. So tell your differential
Yes, sir.
diagnosis.
It could be a nephrotic syndrome with fluid overload.
1.
It could be generalized edema,
And it's
congestive
heart failure,
failure.
but the proteinuria is not in support. So also nail changes are not supportive. Yes.
Yes. Cirrhosis.
Can have hydrothorax, possible. Again, proteinuria is not a favorable thing.
Yes, sir.
Hyperproteinemia can have fluid overload everywhere, but again protein loss in the urine is not supportive. Okay, hypothyroidism is known to produce pleural effusion, is well known to produce ascites, but other findings of proteinuria is not supportive. So we have a couple
Yes,
of
sir.
differential diagnosis at this time. Carry on, carry on. Anything else given?
No, sir.
No. So, basically this patient has got proteinuria. So tell me something about proteinuria. Do you have normally protein in your urine?
Yes, sir. Very minimal amount.
How much? How much can be maximum?
150 milligrams.
150 milligram can be there. That's very good. So where does it come from?
Tubular protein.
Any name for that? Related to horse?
TAM.
TAM horse or yes, that's right, that's right. So when you have proteinuria, that means it can normal up to 150 milligram, that is acceptable. More than that is not acceptable. So what are the sources of this protein in the urine? Anatomically, where from it comes?
Tubular cells.
You said normal persons get from tubule. Is there any other source?
Glomerular.
It can come from glomerulus. So normally protein does not come through glomerulus. Why?
Because of filtration.
So you have got the picture with you. All of you got the picture with you. I am not good in diagrams, but the picture says that there is afferent, there is efferent. It's okay.
Yes, sir.
You can see, no? Afferent blood vessel and efferent blood vessel. So which one brings the blood to the glomerulus? Afferent or efferent?
Afferent.
Afferent brings the blood and efferent is filtrating. And the blood vessel wall has got a cell called as endothelial cell. I have marked the endothelium. Can you see?
Yes, sir.
Yes, these endothelial cells has got fenestrations. These fenestrations are
Yes, sir.
70 to 100 nanomoles size only. So this is the first step of the defense against leakage of particles. Then just below that you have got basement membrane, and just below that you have got epithelial cells which has got food processes called podocytes, and these foot like processes are touching each other such a way that the slit between them called as filtration slit, which is very small, 20 to 30 nanometer only. So normal particles cannot pass through this. So it is the size specific filtration that is taking place such a way that proteins find it difficult to come to the urine. Clear?
Yes, sir.
And all the layers of this membrane, 3 layers, will be having negative charge. And the negatively charged proteins,
Yes, sir.
when they come in contact with the negative charge barrier, they repel, and that's another mechanism by which normally you don't get proteins. Among the proteins, albumin and globulin, which is bigger particle?
Albumin.
Albumin. So the early part of the disease, only the globulin will be coming out. Albumin will not come. So this is called as selective
Selective.
proteinuria. Subsequently, as the damage is more, larger albumin particles comes out and you call it as albuminuria. So as you rightly suggested, one source of the protein is from the glomerulus. Second source of protein is from the tubule, and you can have proteins because of the tubular proteinuria. The third one is called as overflow proteinuria. When do you get overflow proteinuria? Is it when there is higher amount of protein in the blood, as in case of plasma cell dyscrasias, multiple myelomas. You can have filtration of the proteins and you can have light chains and so on in the urine. The last part of the story is when you have problems below the renal system, below the kidneys, because of infections or inflammation of urinary system, maybe UTI, you get proteinuria. So these are the sources of proteinuria, and this is how you look at why proteinuria is not taking place normally. Is the picture adequate enough for you to understand the situation?
Yes, sir.
That's okay. So once you know why it is not filtering, you know in any abnormality you will find either the negative charge is lost, or the filtration pores becomes larger, or the podocytes which are stretching out like fingers or foot processes will be phased out, so that pores will become wider and particles start leaking. This is the basic mechanism of any amount of proteinuria in the human body. Now, how we detect proteinuria in the laboratory? How do you check for urine albumin?
Yes, sir.
How do you check it?
Dipstick.
Dipstick. What is the shortcoming of dipstick? Which protein you may miss by doing dipstick test? Bernstein's protein is not detected by dipstick. Only albuminuria can be detected. So you may miss the Bernstein's protein, but it is easy to do, can be done. And how do you quantify? How do you quantify?
More than 3.5 gram, that is massive proteinuria.
So how do you collect urine? How do you collect urine? Single specimen?
A single specimen taken in the early morning.
Or you want 24 hours?
24 hours.
How do you collect 24-hour urine? Early morning, patient wakes up, patient must be asked to pass urine outside in the urinal. So we are starting the test collection now. Now that particular patient's body does not contain any more urine. Now the patient starts collecting all the urine in that bottle, and next day morning, same time, before the test time is over, patient passes even the last drop of urine into the bottle. So when the patient starts collection, there is no urine left on the human body, and when the patient ends the collection, no urine is left over the human body. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
So this is one way to collect it, but it is cumbersome and difficult. So early morning, single estimation is good enough. The first sample after sleep should be discarded. Next sample you can collect, and you can do what test? Instead of this, what test can you do? Urine, albumin, creatinine ratio can be done, which can be a rough representation of the quantitative estimation of urine. So after making this provisional diagnosis in this patient, how are you going to proceed with the case?
We'll try to find the cause.
Now, first of all, what type of clinical presentation this patient is having? Last time we said clinically renal diseases can present different fashions. One presentation we said acute onset of oliguria, hematuria,
Yes, sir.
which we called as puffiness phase, which is called as acute nephritic illness, and we had wide discussion about that. So here is a scenario where patient is presenting with edema all over the body, massive proteinuria, and there is hypoalbuminemia. So this
Yes, sir.
group of symptom signs collectively called as
Nephrotic syndrome.
nephrotic presentation. So you have one nephritic illness, you have other end you have got the nephrotic syndrome. Now you may find patients who are having massive proteinuria, 3 grams, 4 grams, 5 grams, without edema, without hypoalbuminemia. What do you call them? These patients are known to have massive proteinuria, but they don't qualify themselves to be called as nephrotic syndrome. To say nephrotic syndrome, you need to have edema, hypoalbuminemia, and usually they have dyslipidemia also. Okay, so nephrotic illness will have very minimal amount of protein in the urine. There will be plenty of RBCs in the urine, and proteinuria is very minimal, maximum 1.5 gram, never more than that. There is no heavy proteinuria, and there is no gross edema, and there is not much hypoalbuminemia. But some of these patients have acute nephritic illness, may go to another stage called severe nephritic illness, where they may be having heavy proteinuria at 3.5 gram for example, but presentation exactly like nephritic illness, acute onset edema, hypertension, renal insufficiency, and that is called as severe acute nephritic illness. So nephritic illness can be subdivided into two if you want, need not do that also. So in acute nephritic illness, nephrotic illness, in between heavy massive proteinuria, but not qualifying themselves to call it as nephrotic syndrome. So isolated heavy proteinuria without edema is usually seen in group of conditions called secondary causes like diabetes, okay, focal segmental glomerular sclerosis, secondary to some other condition. You can have massive proteinuria, but primary glomerular diseases usually do not present as massive proteinuria alone. They will go for nephrotic syndrome. Okay, so what are the, so if you look at the spectrum of nephrotic syndrome, 30% or so patient will be having secondary causes like diabetes, SLE, amyloidosis, okay, drug induced and so on. Rest of them will be having primary type of glomerular sclerosis, glomerulonephritis. So what are the primary glomerulonephritis, you know, of primary glomerular diseases? In children, you know, in children minimal lesion. In adults you have got membranous, you have focal segmental glomerular sclerosis, you have membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis. Okay, so you may have different other causes in adults like lupus, diabetes is very common, amyloidosis is not rare. Okay, so minimal lesion nephritis, 90% of the time it is in children, but 10% can occur in adults. So can you tell something about it?
Minimal change disease, on microscopy there won't be much features.
So clinically also there is not much hematuria. Clinically important points are no hypertension, no hematuria, relatively younger age group. Okay, bland urinary sediment, not much RBCs, and they easily respond to steroids, and it keeps on recurring. Light microscopy, immunofluorescence is normal, only electron microscopy will tell you something is wrong with it. So 90% of the time it is idiopathic in nature, only 10% it may be secondary to some NSAID induced or paraneoplastic situation like Hodgkin's lymphoma and so on. So this is a relatively benign process in the sense they usually respond to treatment. When we said the histopathology and we said podocyte, here is a situation where podocyte is effaced, so the slit becomes wide open and they are likely to get into trouble. Okay. Another group of illness is called as focal segmental glomerular cirrhosis. So not cirrhosis, glomerular sclerosis. Okay, not cirrhosis, sclerosis. So it can be focal segmental glomerular sclerosis can again be primary. Commonly they are primary. They can be also secondary. It has got its own specific histopathological features like interstitial infiltration, mesangium. Not interstitium, interstitium is called as mesangium. Mesangium get collapsed and it gets fibrosed. So secondarily also focal segmental sclerosis can be seen, particularly in HIV patients. HIV is common in India, it is common in Kerala. So you are expected to see some case of focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. Reflux diseases can also produce same pattern. Obese people can have focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. Unlike in case of minimal lesion, these patients do have hematuria. Unlike in case of minimal lesion, they may be having hypertension. Unlike in minimal lesion glomerulonephritis, they may have elevated creatinine, elevated urea. So when these points are there, like hypertension, hematuria, think other than minimal lesion glomerulonephritis. And if you suspect minimal lesion and give steroids, the patient is not responding, again think about focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, we also said it can be primary and it can be secondary. And usually if it's primary, they present as acute cases of nephrotic syndrome, and if it is secondary to like HIV and things like that, they come insidiously and they will have massive proteinuria, may not go to nephrotic range level even. So very insidious onset, I think of secondary, otherwise think of primary. Now comes the third variety called membranous glomerulonephritis, which is possibly the commonest for us in the adult age group. Membranous glomerulonephritis may have a little bit of hypertension, may have some hematuria, and histopathology is slightly different, as the term is very clear, membranous. So glomerular basement membrane becomes thickened. That is the basic problem with these patients. Again, it can also be primary, it can be secondary. So as we told last time, in a renal system, presentation can be nephrotic, but etiology may be variable. Under the heading of membranous lesion, there are many diseases coming up. For example, SLE can present as membranous glomerulonephritis. Autoimmune diseases can present. Hepatitis B can present like this. Okay. Thyroid diseases can present like this. NSAIDs can present like this. Yesteryears, penicillamine and gold was widely used for treatment of arthritis patients, rheumatoid arthritis. And when these 1990s, when the ACE inhibitors came up, the first drug came into market was captopril. That also was a culprit for producing this illness. But important point for membranous glomerulonephritis is, whenever you have membranous glomerulonephritis in adult, especially after age of 40 years, never stop there, keep on thinking and investigating for internal malignancy. It can be in the stomach, anywhere, particularly lymphoma should be high in your list and you should pursue it, because early presentation as nephrotic syndrome may mask the real picture underlying it, namely internal malignancy. So this is the important point, you must always think about it. Then coming to the other causes of, if a patient is coming with rheumatoid arthritis, subsequently patient is having generalized edema, what will you suspect? Suppose you are getting a patient with paraplegia, bed bound with the bed sores for 10 years, come with frothy urine, edema, what will you suspect? What systemic complication you get after long infections, inflammation in the body? Amyloidosis. TB patients get amyloid. Leprosy patients get amyloid. Rheumatoid arthritis patients get amyloid. Bed sores for a long time get amyloid. Some infection in the body get amyloid. So Amyloid can occur in two forms. The two pathological forms of amyloid. Two different chains are there. What are they?
AP and AA.
AA and AL. AA and AL. AA is for secondary, like rheumatoid arthritis, chronic infection. Okay. So the serum amyloid from the amyloid fibrils. So it is called AA, and AL is the one seen with light chain dyscrasias. So two types of amyloidosis may be seen. Okay. So far we said the pathogenesis or basic mechanism may be because of alteration in the permeability of the glomerular basement membrane, which has got filtration mechanism, three layers. One is endothelium, one is glomerular basement membrane, and then you got epithelial cell. So any injury to them can make this porous and you get nephrotic range proteinuria. So your job is to confirm that there is massive albuminuria, which you already said. The second component you must look for is the hypoalbuminemia. And third part we said there will be elevated cholesterol synthesis. So how does cholesterol synthesis takes place?
Cholesterol synthesis occurs in the liver.
Liver, yes.
As a product.
Lipoprotein synthesis increases. So hypoalbuminemia in turn stimulates the liver to synthesize more, and in case you get the in turn you get the lipoprotein synthesis activation, and you get increased amount of cholesterol, and decreased metabolism of triglycerides also takes place simultaneously, and that leads on to hypertriglyceridemia. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. One important point is body has got very good capacity to synthesize albumin even if some amount of albumin is leaked. So in situations where you have primary glomerular diseases producing nephrotic syndrome, body fails to synthesize adequate amount of albumin to compensate. But secondary, so you get hypoalbuminemia and you get classical nephrotic syndrome. But other condition we said secondary, by some unknown mechanism the total protein in the body does not come down, also there is albuminuria. Okay. And when there is too much amount of cholesterol in the body, it comes out in the urine. That is called as
hypercholesterol.
In the lipiduria. Yes, somebody has Jones, very good. Lipiduria in the sediment, and you get fatty cast. Fatty cast is enclosed by the plasma membrane of the digested cells, and they are free in the urine. Under polarized light you can see them, and they got appearance of Maltese cross. You all seen Maltese cross?
Okay, sir.
All of you see Maltese cross?
Sir, the picture you
Yeah, that's right. So Maltese cross, one I draw was not that good, but the picture from the original one, it shows 4 V's with the concavity put together, and Malta, the soldiers, their military and all have this emblem, and St. John's unit and some of the international organizations has got this Maltese cross as the emblem. Okay, so you may read more about what is Maltese cross, what's the origin of this and so on. I myself will not be going to that. So what are the, so you have got hyperproteinemia, you have to check for serum albumin, serum globulin, we have to check for cholesterol level and triglyceride. This is not mandatory for nephrotic syndrome, but commonly seen. Blood pressure may be elevated, may be normal. Depending on the etiology, urinary sediment may be there, may not be there. All depends upon. But the basic concept is primary and secondary, and primary causes we already mentioned, couple of them. Now can you tell something about secondary causes?
Secondary causes include SLE.
SLE. So there will be other features of SLE like
Butterfly rash.
there may be there, oral ulcers, arthritis, photosensitivity, then alopecia, discoid lesions, like,
Yes, sir.
okay, you may have some vascularity lesion in the skin, nail bed, there may be PUO, there may be splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, there may be hypertension, okay. So multi-system disease may be there. If it is a SLE, there may be some clue. By the time you get renal involvement, usually you get a clue, but SLE can manifest primarily as a renal disease as well. So you have to keep it a possibility and investigate for that also. More common than SLE is something else. What is it?
Diabetes.
Diabetes. So how will you know a patient's nephrotic state is because of diabetes or otherwise? So diabetes basically produces microvascular disease. Microvascular disease produces nephropathy, neuropathy and retinopathy. So when you get any patient with diabetes who is having proteinuria, don't say it is due to diabetes. That particular patient can have SLE or any other illness or primary glomerular diseases. So always better to
Yes, sir.
examine the fundus, and if there is retinopathy changes of diabetes, you conclude that this patient is having diabetic nephropathy. If there are no changes in the fundus, it is unlikely that the patient is having diabetes as the cause for nephrotic syndrome. This is an important point
Okay,
to be thought of. And yesteryears we used to use gold and penicillamine that could produce nephrotic syndrome. Rarely snake bite,
okay, sir.
malariae, plasmodium malariae, not seen here. Rarely syphilis. Such etiologies are also postulated for nephrotic syndrome, but not commonly seen. Renal vein thrombosis as a cause or a complication is also possible. So depending upon the scenario, investigation go widely. If you are suspecting SLE, you go for ESR. You are going looking for hemoglobin, leukopenia, lymphopenia, okay, thrombocytopenia. So like that you go. You check for the complement. You check for the anti-Smith, anti-DNA, antibody. You measure even quantitate. So accordingly you plan and investigate whatever etiology you are suspecting. HIV patient, you got investigation that way. So hepatitis B is one side, hepatitis C another. So everything is going side by side depending upon the etiology. So investigations are different for individual cases. Only the common thing is edema, massive proteinuria and hyperproteinemia. Rest of things are all variable. Histopathology may be variable, clinical course may be variable, etiology may be variable, and prognosis can be variable. Now they may go for some complications. What are the complications they go through?
Renal failure.
That comes very late. Unlike to something like a RPGN, where acute nephritis is the usual presentation. They may lose a lot of proteins. So your body mass index may remain same because of fluid and edema. Weight remains same, but body mass, lean body mass may come down. Yes. If you give them violent diuretic therapy, they may for hypovolemia, BP may drop. And in such scenario, sometimes you may get acute kidney injury also. Yes. Infections are very common in them. Why?
Hyperproteinemia.
One is hyperproteinemia. Two, the edema itself is a good source for culture of the organism, maybe subcutaneous tissue, scrotum and so on. Where do you get this edema first in renal diseases?
Facial puffiness.
Why facial puffiness? Edema in renal diseases by some mechanism is in the loose areolar tissue. Wherever subcutaneous tissue is loose, vulva, vagina, scrotum. Okay. So such areas are commonly in trouble. And when you talk about infections, which are the site specific or commonly seen infection sites.
Skin infection.
Okay, skin infection. But if a patient is having ascites and patient complains of abdominal pain, what will you suspect?
Peritonitis.
Due to which organism? One particular organism is it is a encapsulated organism, commonly pneumococcus. So it's a pneumococcal peritonitis. So the moment they say abdominal pain, take out the fluid, gram stain, culture and see, and start antibiotic accordingly. Okay, they may be losing a lot of immunoglobulin in their urine. The total human inside the blood, hemoglobin may be low. Some of these patients may be already on steroids that make them susceptible for infections. And ascitic fluid is a good culture medium, and the WBC function may also be impaired. Cellular functions are impaired in case of nephrotic syndrome, and they may have some vitamin D deficiency also. They lost not only the immunoglobulins, they lost fibrinogen, they may be losing some amount of protein C, protein S, antithrombin 3. So many coagulant factors, procoagulant, anticoagulants they may be losing, such a way they are more susceptible for thromboembolism. So where do they get thromboembolism? In the arteries and veins. Which veins are commonly implicated? Renal vein. Renal vein thrombosis can occur in any scenario, more so in membranous glomerulonephritis, you get them. And this renal vein thrombosis take two different patterns. One is acute renal vein thrombosis, characterized by flank pain, hematuria, and acute renal shutdown. So if a nephrotic patient tells suddenly they got flank pain and some blood is coming out, then no more urine, think about acute renal vein thrombosis. Chronic is very silent and you may miss the diagnosis. So another complication of nephrotic syndrome is they go for anemia. Why do you get anemia? One is, of course, there is a
decreased erythropoietin.
Maybe decreased erythropoietin. Yes. Decrease in the erythropoietin. They may be losing some nutrients through their urine. The filtration, it filters not only the albumin, it filters any particle that can go out. So you may be losing quite few of them, and you get normocytic normochromic anemia of any chronic disease. And in the laboratory also there may be some confusions regarding thyroid function test interpretation, because the loss of thyroid binding globulin that can create thyroid function interpretation. Although clinically they are euthyroid, you may suspect that they are having some problems. Rarely they can go for some renal tubular dysfunction. So what are the renal tubular dysfunction situations? What all things can happen? What all things are lost through your tubules? When you have tubular defect, what all things happen? Anything else? Okay, I'll give you another scenario. You are checking the urine of a patient with bentic solution and you find there is glucose in the urine. It means a reduction is taking place. What are the possibilities?
Glycosuria.
Due to what? Renal glycosuria. Okay, so tubular dysfunction. Same thing, your amino acids can be lost. Okay, so that is also possible, right? Complications. Now coming to the investigations and diagnosis and treatment, you said your quantitative estimation must be more than 3.5 grams proteinuria per 24 hours, and you had to check for serum proteins and confirm that hyperproteinemia is there. You look for etiology, diabetes, SLE, HIV, and simple things like history of chronic use of NSAIDs may be there, lithium. Okay, the penicillin gold are written in the books but not commonly seen these days, but interferons sometimes can be the culprit. Then ANA I said, C3, C4, anti-DNA, okay, light chains in the urine, Benson's protein. In relevant cases, if you suspect a myeloma, multiple myeloma, you suspect you get immunofixation, you got Benson protein, you may do bone marrow. Syphilis, you may do the test for serology for syphilis. HIV may test accordingly. Hepatitis B, Hepatitis C, cryoglobulinemia. Okay, once you have done this much investigation, question is, will you do a biopsy or not? For adults with nephrotic syndrome, common rule is you must do a biopsy and take histopathology and see what is happening, because you are going to deal with a chronic disease. But there are couple of contraindications. Can you enumerate few? For any biopsy, biopsy is an invasive procedure. You are passing a gun and just taking a piece. So one is bleeding disorder. You must be very careful. You should not do, preferably. Yes. Severe hypertension uncontrolled, you should not do. If both kidneys are small, that means they are scarred, fibrosed. So histopathology may not help you. All of them will be showing same changes irrespective of the etiology and pathology. So if there are multiple large cysts, again you may not be able to do it. If there is hydronephrosis, you cannot do. Single kidney is a very good answer. Single kidney you should not do. That is very dangerous. Okay. And patient must be in the bed. Uncooperative patient, of course, you cannot do. So you must remember there is something called as biopsy. And biopsy, histopathology, you do light microscopy. Minimal lesion, you will not be able to see anything. Immunofluorescence can be taken. Immunopathology is there. But again, that's seen only if there is an immune deposit seen. And electron microscopy is the other option where you can go for diagnosis of minimal lesion glomerulonephritis. Now, how are you going to treat these patients? The basic problem is that proteinuria. How do you check proteinuria? You have to reduce proteinuria by some means. What did you do? If there is a specific condition, you treat a specific condition. SLE, you give steroid. That's the treatment. Okay. But if you don't get any cause, primary glomerular disease, then you reduce the intraglomerular pressure. By which drug? ACE inhibitors. You restrict the salt intake and you adjust the fluid intake according to the urine output, and salt should be less than 2 grams a day. Okay. So you prepare a completely salt free diet, and 1 level teaspoon will be 4 grams and half of it will be 2 grams. That is all what is allowed. Loop diuretic to start with. Subsequently you may add other type of diuretics also. As the patient develops edema, obviously your aldosterone will come into the play, and secondary aldosterone is also seen. So you may have to add other types of diuretics also. Hyperlipidemia, usually you may give statins, and as the disease is controlled, it may reverse back to normal. If there is history of renal vein thrombosis, anticoagulants is a must. And if you find it is a immunological disease, immunosuppressants will have to be given, like corticosteroid, steroid sparing agents, rituximab, and so on. So basically we are talking about nephrotic syndrome today, and we have just gone through the basic concept that it means that a group of symptoms and signs together is called nephrotic syndrome. It can be primary and secondary. Okay, primary, we said different types of glomerular diseases we said. Second, and out of these glomerular diseases we said histopathology, and histopathology itself, etiology is different. All etiologies will be different types will be having different types of etiologies, and we have to find out it's a primary disease or secondary and treat accordingly. You got any doubts, you can ask.
Okay, sir.